That to me is a huge accomplishment, and regardless of whether I agree or disagree with her movement selections or what she's doing or whatever it may be, she's got people moving, she's enhancing the lives of many people, and I respect that. I simply wish from my perspective there was a bit more correct information floating around. Once again, it's time to present some bits and bobs about some bits and bobs. So we're going to be talking about Chloe Ting, full body workout with dumbbells, get toned challenge. All I'm going to say is before this video, if at any point throughout this entire video you actually decide you in fact learn something from this video, I'd very much appreciate it if you did consider subscribing to the channel. But again, only if you've learned something, and if you didn't learn something, then go to my Instagram and send me an abusive message, and I'll probably perceive that as affection, and it'll make me feel very warm inside. Firstly, 20 exercises. That's bloody wild. Obviously I know our goals are different, but if you're looking at like the realm of building muscle, which funnily enough, if you're doing a full body resistance workout, probably is going to be somewhat applicable, you don't need to do a lot of volume. Honestly, everyone has this idea that you need to do loads. You really don't. To put in perspective, I'm trying to build muscle. That is my primary goal, and I do like 5 to 6 exercises a day, 2 to 3 sets max. Don't need to do a lot as long as you're training hard enough. If you're not training hard enough, I actually sent this out via the mailing list, so if you aren't already subscribed, click the link down below to the TFNL website, tfnl.uk, go to the bottom and subscribe to the mailing list, where I actually did a big post about intensity and why you need to train with sufficient intensity. And quite frankly, if you're not training with sufficient intensity, then you will actually need to do a lot more volume to progress, whereas if you actually just train harder, you can get away with doing a lot less. This kind of squat thruster press thing. Firstly, I'm not a massive fan of combo movements, but I do understand the application here, especially when you're a bit limited to equipment. What I would say, if you're going to do a squat pattern, it is really important to go as low as you can, depending on what you're trying to target. If you're trying to put a bit more emphasis on the glutes, for example, you probably don't need to go beyond 90 degrees, so maybe similar to where she is now. If you're trying to put more emphasis on the quads, you do need to go a lot lower, where we are encouraging as much knee travel as possible, thus lengthening the quads as much as possible. So the reverse lunge twist and tuck thing, the lunge is great. I think the reverse lunge is a fantastic movement. The twist, it is what it is, but the tuck, so you know we're using like this leg kick at the top, I always question what that's trying to achieve, because the leg that is kicking is under no real resistance, in the sense that the dumbbell here, being held up here, does not contribute to the resistance that leg is experiencing, because what we're kind of looking at really working there, for example, will be the hip flexors, bring that leg up. For that dumbbell to actually have application to hip flexor resistance, it would need to be around her foot, thus making that lifting portion of the rep harder, but it's not. So now we've obviously swapped to the other side. I'm actually going to say something now. It's key to note, and this is actually really important, assuming you're balanced and you don't have any like muscular imbalances anywhere, it's really important to rest between sides, because if you go from the left side straight into the right side is going to be carrying over some fatigue from the previous side and potentially actually recruiting smaller motor units, which could impact stimulus, thus potentially reducing the stimulus the right side or the second side is going to experience from the movement you're doing. If you have imbalances, then I'd go weaker side straight into stronger side to help balance out those imbalances. But if you are relatively balanced and symmetrical and whatnot, then I would really take a rest between, otherwise you risk actually developing imbalances. The deadlift, fantastic movement, I love it, I respect it, it is what it is. The fly variation is a tricky one, because again, when we're looking at taking muscles to like closer proximity of failure for development, and again, whether you're just working out at home for fun or for toning, as this video states, you still need to take muscles relatively close to failure to actually develop them. You should, in theory, I like to think, be deadlifting a lot more than you're going to reverse fly. The reverse fly might be struggling here. Your rear delts and kind of upper back could be struggling, as that weight might result in you getting to close proximity of failure. But your deadlift muscles, in this case, is more like an RDL, so we're looking at like the hamstrings and glutes and erectors, are going to be able to tolerate a lot more load. Therefore, their stimulus is going to be very low, and there's kind of a discrepancy. The same thing with this kind of lateral to front raise variation. Are your legs going to go out first, or are your shoulders going to go out first? They're both fair movements if you want to include them. That being said, I'm not really a massive fan of front raises, because if you're doing like enough pressing movements, just like chest presses, shoulder presses, etc., your anterior delts, being the front of your delts, are going to get enough stimulus probably. Your shoulders are going to burn and probably give out first. Your legs are probably going to experience a pretty underwhelming stimulus. So a sumo squat pulse is interesting because it very much pushes a lot of emphasis towards that kind of bottom portion of the movement. But what she's kind of really currently doing is holding more of actually a mid position where it's keeping quite a lot of tension on the muscles, which is fine and it's cool if you enjoy it. From a development perspective, it's probably not the best thing. But what this does do is kind of promote a lot of that burning feeling, which can very much lead people to believe that they're doing more than they actually are. They might associate this, because it's causing more burn than a regular squat, with growth, and then assume because the regular squat doesn't cause as much of a burn sensation that said regular squat is probably not as effective for development and gains as this movement might be, when actually it's probably the other way around. Just because you're hurting it doesn't necessarily mean you're working it effectively, and that's probably going to be a topic of a future mailing list subject, so hop in the mailing list and get ready for some waffle about stuff. And it's key to note, yes, I know not everybody is primarily focused on hypertrophy. I fully understand that. It's actually written in the description of this video. When you are incorporating resistance-based training, as Chloe is doing here, there is going to be a hypertrophy element within it. And hypertrophy aside, the technical cues I'm presenting to you are probably actually going to be applicable and potentially even useful, regardless of what your goals are, because again, they're to help the movement, not necessarily the goal. So you can still improve movement quality without purely focusing on the development of muscle and building muscle to align with whatever goal you're hoping to achieve. That being said, if you are looking at maximizing results from a workout like this, a lot of the basic principles of hypertrophy do actually apply. Do you want to burn calories? Then you probably need to move more. Do you want to build some muscle and potentially even tone, which kind of go hand in hand, although I'm not a big fan of the word tone, but I've explained that before. A lot of what I'm saying is still going to be applicable, and it's probably actually going to increase the likelihood of you achieving the results you're hoping for, and maybe even enhance the results you're hoping to see. To be the B stance deadlift, or like the B stance RDL, whatever you want to call it, is actually a really solid movement. It's actually a movement we've just thrown into one of the new group training programs. So obviously, if you aren't aware, I run group coaching where you can basically sign up for less than $1 a day, where you can follow a program designed for me for either at the gym, at home, or if you're looking to emphasize lower body development. I've got one for all three of those things, and you also get access to me so I can give you advice and whatnot. But the B stance deadlift is something that has been thrown into the mix, and it's a bloody good movement, honestly. What I would say is there's an argument here of whether you kind of encourage rotation or not. For maybe beginners, I'd probably say don't worry too much about any kind of torso rotation, because quite frankly, you just want to nail the movement pattern and kind of keep that neutral spine. If you're a bit more advanced, you can consider some rotation to further lengthen the glutes, but that's probably a topic for another day, and that might not necessarily be applicable to what we're looking at here. But regardless, the B stance deadlift is a fantastic movement. Just remember, it is technically a unilateral movement, which means one side at a time. So yes, you do have to do the other side as well. But like I said earlier, rest between. Trust me, it feels silly and it seems silly. Just, you'll thank me one day, maybe. And if you don't thank me one day, I'm sorry. The high knees is interesting because what purpose does the kind of dumbbell overhead have here? Could you argue there's a potential consideration of like core stability to an extent? Maybe. But realistically, the dumbbell overhead has no application or relevance to what the lower body is doing. It's not going to make that movement harder from a resistance perspective. Therefore, it's not going to be massively relevant. You'd get the same stimulus from just doing it without the dumbbell overhead, basically. But again, it also depends why you're doing it. If you're doing this movement purely because you enjoy it, genuinely, that's good enough reason to do it. I'm a big believer in enjoyment being a really important factor when it comes to training, regardless of what your goals are, because quite frankly, if you don't enjoy what you're doing, you're not going to do it. If you don't do it, you're not going to see the results you want to see. I'm going to interrupt you for a second just to say that if you do want to work with me on a one-to-one basis online, where I will coach you towards your goals, whatever they may be, I am currently taking on some more one-to-one online clients where I will help you do just that. Click the link down below for the application form, fill the bits and bobs in. It's probably also linked in the comment section too. Have a gander, and maybe we could hop on a consultation call just to see if there are any juicy things we could achieve together. Tricep extension, yeah, honestly, it's really good. If you want to go into like the fun stuff behind the tricep extension, overhead movements like this are a bit more length and position dominant, so that means that the majority of tension's down here. So I would definitely increase range of motion, really try and get a stretch at the bottom here. The other thing to note is they're going to shift a bit more emphasis over to two of the heads in particular of the triceps, being the lateral head, which is the kind of the short head here, and the medial head being under here, and maybe take a bit of emphasis away from the long head, which is the long one that runs under here. Although no, you cannot isolate a singular head of the triceps, it's just going to shift more emphasis over to certain areas. So that's something to note. But when you're doing most pressing variations, for example, the lateral and medial heads get a lot of stimulus, whereas the long head doesn't. So it might be worth considering throwing a bit more long head work in there. But quite frankly, that's just a fun note to keep in mind. And it's probably not actually that relevant. I just wanted to waffle about something because I need help. The thing here, when you're doing this rotation, again, I guess the argument here is rotation, which means it's going to be shifting emphasis over to the obliques. Look at how much the torso is rotating here versus how much the arms are moving. If you want to really work the obliques, the arms should kind of be locked and you should rotate with the torso, not moving the arms like so, because again, one of the roles of the obliques is going to be rotation or anti-rotation. So the torso should be rotating to shift emphasis over to the obliques. If the arms are moving, the obliques aren't doing as much as they could or should. Yeah, honestly, the shoulder press is a great movement. I love it. I respect it. But two ways you can really think about the shoulder press. If you kind of come in about 45 degrees, a bit more in front of you, you're probably going to shift a bit more emphasis over to the front delts, being the anterior delts, and it might also be a bit nicer on your shoulders if you have some shoulder issues. If you come out a bit more like Chloe is doing, well, she's kind of actually in the middle, but if you come out a bit more like so, it might potentially distribute that emphasis over to the side delts as well, so the front and side delts are getting good stimulation there. But again, it really is just preference. I don't think it's a right or wrong, it's just preference and what you find most comfortable. The front lateral raise thing, I don't really get behind. I'm kind of a big believer in not overcomplicating things. Just do one, either do a front raise or a lateral raise, or do both, just not at the same time. Front raise first, lateral raise first, vice versa, because oftentimes you're probably going to get confused and you're going to be a sausage and you're going to get all jumbled and do something wrong, when in reality, you might as well just focus on one, do it properly, do it better, and then go to the other one afterwards if you want to. Same thing kind of applies with the lateral raises. You don't necessarily have to come directly out to the side. You can come at like 45 degrees, similar to the shoulder press, but again, it really depends. I find if I go out to the side a lot more, my traps get very involved. If I bring my arms in a bit more and I'm kind of raising about 40 to 45 degrees, so more on the scapular plane, which is like there, you can't really see, but it's like, instead of out here, it's kind of like there. For me, that takes a lot of emphasis off my traps, as they are quite overdeveloped for me, therefore they kind of take a lot of load when I wish they wouldn't, and it's just a bit nicer. But again, that's purely preference and it's purely what works best for you. That just works best for me. Honestly, as a whole, like, I know I've given Chloe a lot of flack in the past, but genuinely, I actually just really appreciate the fact that she gets people moving. That to me is a huge accomplishment, and regardless of whether I agree or disagree with her movement selections or what she's doing or whatever it may be, she's got people moving, she's enhancing the lives of many people, and I respect that. I simply wish, from my perspective, there was a bit more correct information floating around, and maybe the demonstrations were a little bit better, a little bit more informed, and maybe just for the sake of helping people along their journey, I wish it was a bit more informative and educational, but it's okay, that's where I'm coming in. I'm going to waffle about things that Chloe probably doesn't want to waffle about because it's not her market, so I'm going to fill the gap because I have too much free time. I always say, if you enjoy this workout and it aligns with your goals and what you're trying to achieve, who am I to say you shouldn't do it? If you want to do it, sure, go for it. Just know that there are adjustments and modifications you can make to potentially make it a little bit better, depending on what your goals might be. Regardless, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. And until the next one, thank you for tolerating me. Thank you for tolerating my home workout tricks and tips. And thank you for tolerating the video.